Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Johngy or Else podcast, without which life would be incomplete and have little or no meaning. I am who else but Tommy Else, and with me as always is the man on the beat coming to us from Skokie, Illinois, from johnjysbeat.com, Mr. Jonathan Sebastian Robleski.
Sebastian, that's very stately.
How you doing, John?
I am good. I'm good. Bears got crushed today, but other than that, doing good.
Yeah,
How are you?
last I saw the score was like 31-10. I'm sure it was probably worse when it was all said and done.
They're a train wreck.
Well, we're not here to talk about the poor Bears.
No.
We're here because we have another great guest on the show, and yes, John is the one who brought this guest to the show because he needs to feel like he gets credit. Anytime he brings somebody on,
As long as the committee knows,
he needs to be acknowledged, so to speak. So, John, why don't you clue everyone into who we have with us today?
well, way back, I don't even know. Honestly, I don't even remember what year it was, like 2007, 8, somewhere in that range.
So you're like early 50s at the time?
At Motor City Comic Con, I was wandering through Artist Alley and I came across this cool looking booth with this guy, a logo of a guy wearing a mask and half a face cover and top hat. And I thought, that's a really cool looking booth. And I went over, and it's hard for authors. Artists could display all their artwork. Authors have to display their books. So he
right, and so it's right, and it's like you have no idea what their writing is like based on the cover of a book.
Exactly.
That's tough.
So I approached him. I learned his name was Dirk Manning. Over the years, we've become friends. We talked a lot about a lot of things. He's a big wrestling fan, which will come into play with some of his books that we'll be discussing. I also learned that he's a big ice cream aficionado, and he turned me on to Jennings Ice Cream in Chicagoland. Awesome ice cream. Probably the best ice cream I've ever had.
You said there's 6 locations or something?
There's at least 6, yeah. I've yet to have the one.
Is it spelled with a Y or an I?
Jeni.
Oh, okay. Well, see, that's important because people might want to Google that stuff.
There are some outside of Chicagoland. I think there's like one in Ohio, but I've had many of their, and I'm not even a big ice cream guy. I generally don't even eat ice cream, but this is so good. There's one right by Wrigley Field, and every time I go there or near there, I will stop and get a small cone. The only complaint I have is that I've been dying to get their goat cheese ice cream, and I've yet to have it.
Do you tolerate lactose?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know. You have all these things that you can't eat and stuff.
See, you keep saying I have all these things I can't eat, and every time I'm trying to true. But let's move beyond that. We're not here to talk about my dietary restrictions in your mind. We're here to talk about.
But we only have so much time. So, all right. Well, that being said, let's get to something far more interesting, and we'll talk to our guest today. He is an author. His name is Dirk Manning. Welcome to the show.
For the Johngy or Else podcast, we welcome into our studios Dirk Manning. How are you, Dirk?
Good, man. Good to see you. Very well played, sir. Very well played.
Do the pose with your book.
Yeah, so, I've got the here. I'll not that I want to one up you, but I'll do it.
Oh, here it comes.
I've got the Kickstarter exclusive hardcover edition right here. See, so yeah, it's good to see you, man. How are you?
I am good, man. I am good. We last talked at New York Comic Con. You were insanely busy as always. I followed you since then. You're like everywhere, every day, man.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I am now officially off the road until March.
How's that feeling?
I've got a ton of stuff coming out, ton of stuff to be working on, not the least of which I'm sure we'll be talking about here in a minute with the Arn Anderson book. But between Arn Anderson's book, the partnership we announced with Cheney Entertainment for the Ron Cheney project, and just a bunch of other stuff. It's kind of like I'm in my, I would say winter hibernation, but that's not even close to being accurate. But like my winter homebound time. And I'll be back on the road in March, which will be my 20th anniversary as a published writer.
Wow.
Congratulations, man.
Thank you.
It's not easily done.
It is not, and it's wild. And if 2023 goes according to plan, knock on wood, yeah, I'll have my 20th graphic novel out in 20 years in 2023. So what a trip, man. It's wild.
I think I first met you like in 2010, maybe 2009.
It's been a minute. Yeah, it's
Motor
been
City Comic Con way back when.
Yeah. It's been a while, and I've always appreciated your friendship and your professional support as well. And yeah, it's been a while, and it's funny. Looking back, I just realized recently that this March will be 20 years, and I look back and I was kind of like double checking the math and triple checking the math. Like, I guess that explains like the gray hair coming in, right?
Yeah.
But thinking about how this journey has progressed, like you said, since 2009, since 2010, even in the last 5 years,
Well, kind of, I know 20 years is kind of a lot to unpack, but can you kind of just give our viewers and listeners an idea of like how you got started in this, and at what point did you know this was something you wanted to do, and then how did it get going?
Yeah, I joke with people, but then specify that's not a joke, that I think being a writer is not a job, it's a curse.
Mm-hmm.
It's just one of those things that it's in you, and it's what you're going to do, and it's what you have to do. I wish I could settle down and watch TV more, play video games, or anything, hang out, things like that,
Yeah.
But to me, it's just like, gotta be writing, gotta be working on the next thing, gotta be getting the next thing out. My career launched in 2003 with an online comic series called Nightmare World, which was my first comic series. I was one of the first people publishing fully realized comic books online.
Yeah.
Back in the era of dial-up modems, and we did 2 pages a week every Thursday. It was a horror anthology series. It did very, very well. I joke that things like MySpace helped make my career.
Yeah. But that's what was going on at the time. Yeah.
Well, it was, and what I did, and not to get too far in the weeds, but with my series Nightmare World, I really catered it. Well, not catered it, that's not true. Advertised it, I guess. I advertised it more, and I catered my advertising more to the horror crowd than the comic crowd, because 2003 was kind of a lull in a way for a lot of horror stuff. Horror anthologies especially were kind of like short stories were really seen as kind of like the gutter of comics. Like, oh, we need filler, we'll put in a short story. And I've always been a short story guy. I love good short stories. I love novels too, but when you look at guys like, whether it be Edgar Allan Poe or Harlan Ellison, or I even think some of Stephen King's best stuff is his short story stuff, or Ray Bradbury, there's an art to the short story. And snot-nosed young punk Dirk Manning in 2003 said, I want to show people how much you can do in comics, in short stories, with horror, and this is what I'm doing. And that built the foundation of my career. I'm a horror guy first and foremost, but
yeah,
I've never made a secret of the fact that I love heavy metal, and I love ice cream, and I love wrestling as well. And over the last 20 years, I don't think I've gotten to write really a true ice cream comic yet, but I've got to do comics with rock stars. I've got to do comics with horror icons. I get to do my own horror comics. And then the last couple of years, I've kind of veering into doing some wrestling comics a little bit too.
Well, I think the ice cream is still a fairly open genre ripe for the picking. So, you could probably get in there and dominate it fairly easily if you just went in and did it. So
there's a fairly popular horror comic, ironically enough, through Image Comics called Ice Cream Man. And luckily, it doesn't deal with ice cream proper as much as you might suspect. The main character is kind of like poses an ice cream man, but I do agree that I want to find that angle. I had an opportunity years ago that there was a kind of a half offer on the table to do like some signings at this ice cream chain, and we were going to do I think what they call it, like comic Sundays or comic book Sundays,
Yeah.
where they serve Sundays and then have like
Cool.
you come in and do like comic book signings there.
Yeah.
So we'll see. The time will come. I'm very big on always waiting for the right time to do the right thing. But
You'll know when the time is right. Yeah, it'll present itself to you. So we know you have a big project coming out, and it involves none other than the wrestling legend. If I don't know if that's even doing him enough credit, but Mr.
Right.
Arn Anderson, you've done a graphic novel with Tony Schiavone as well.
Yep.
Can you kind of talk a little about the Schiavone one and then lead us into the Arn book?
Yeah, the Tony Schiavone book came together through a mutual friend of ours, Mike Dawkins, who's gained a certain amount of celebrity status, I guess, for lack of a better word, online. It's like the gimmick attorney. Mike is a buddy of mine. He's an attorney, and he helps wrestlers trademark their names and their gimmicks, basically, you know. And this was in 2020.
That's a smart idea because there's a legit need for that, you know. And if you could if you could specialize in that, I mean, more and more now than ever, people need that.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I think in a lot of ways, what he's done is really kind of changed the landscape of how professional wrestlers treat the business aspect of it, that they can own their name, they can own their gimmicks they come up with, you know.
Right.
And so what ended up happening was I think Mike's grand plan was to slowly network me and Tony together. I know he kind of talked to Tony about like, hey man, you ever think about doing a book, maybe a comic book? And then it kind of came to me like, hey, would you be interested in doing a comic book with Tony Schiavone? And I think the plan was to bring us together in person at C2E2 2020. I had a pretty severe family situation. For the first time in my life, I missed that show, and which C2E2 is one of my favorite shows of the year. So I mean, it broke my heart, but you know, family first, right?
Right.
But I thought that's okay. We'll connect at the next show. Well, then
and then COVID comes along.
Then COVID ripped through and turned the whole world upside down. So what ended up happening was me and Mike and Tony, my editor Drina Joe, Dave Silva, who does a lot of Tony's social media stuff. We got together on Zoom, and at the time we thought, oh well, this is going to pass, and you know, maybe a month or something like that, but we can kind of get the ball rolling this way. We ended up agreeing to the book and drafted the whole book over close to a year when all said and done on Zoom, just like this.
Yeah.
You know, it was really fun. It was a really cool opportunity. Tony's story is very fascinating, and he has a very Americana story. Young boy that grows up watching wrestling to getting involved in the industry, falling out of love with the industry, leaving and going and working at Starbucks and stuff like that for 20 years, coming back in and really recognizing his legacy. And yeah, I mean, it's incredible. That book did phenomenally well. You know, I really think we caught lightning in a bottle on that. We did over $135,000 on Kickstarter. We had wrestlers from all the industry dropping promos for it. It was #1 bestseller on Amazon. Butts and Seats was the first, and Tony deserves all the credit for this. It was the first comic book or first original graphic novel to be advertised on cable television.
Right.
You know, because it was getting plugs through an AW. You know, whenever Britt Baker was on screen, all of a sudden they would advertise Tony's book, you know.
Yeah.
So through that process, you know, Arn, who's buddies with Tony, I guess kind of reached out to Mike and to Tony and stuff. Was like, hey, when do you know, I would like to do this too. I would like to do a
where's the Arn Anderson graphic novel?
Yeah, I was kind of like, he's like, where's my comic? You know,
yeah.
Which is fascinating. But Tony, that story has, Arn has an equally fascinating story in a much different way. And Arn, you know, wrote a book, he'll tell you, 20 or so years ago, but it was kind of a kayfabe style book and stuff like that. You know, this is Arn's real story, right?
Yeah.
This is Arn's true story about how he grew up and then how he entered professional wrestling, and it covers his whole in-ring career.
Now, this is one of the things that surprised me when I heard about this project. You know, and this is me being presumptuous and projecting onto Arn, but I just like, he's always been very old school and has been a big kayfabe guy, you know, and kept
Right.
his cards close to the vest. So for him
Right.
to get out and tell his real story, to me, is like, I was just very surprised to hear that that's where this was going.
And this is a book that is not going to like give away like secrets, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
It's not a book where like, oh, let me tell you about this time I went on the town with these guys and these things happened, you know.
yeah, yeah,
But what it is about is how he got involved in the business and talked about. And you're right. And Art is he's a gentleman. I mean,
yeah,
anyone who meets Art Anderson, I think, even for 30 seconds, can tell you he
yeah,
is gracious and he's a gentleman. Now, that's not to say he couldn't still pick you up and to this day and crack you and have like a pixie stick if you
yeah,
wanted
yeah,
to.
yeah.
You know,
He
but
still has those forearms. Yeah,
it just, yeah, you know, it's like it just unbelievable, you know.
yeah,
But yeah, it's about his life, and I think it was to a point where seeing what we did with Tony's book, he'll be the first to tell you that he always felt the time wasn't right.
sure.
You know, the time wasn't right to tell that story, and it is. And again, we're not like blowing, you know, secrets out of the water and things
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. It's a simple story about who he is and how he came to be where he's at and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's I'll tell you, man, it's fascinating because his life was not easy. His
Yeah.
life was he overcame obstacles I think a lot of people would tell you are insurmountable
I
to
would
get
im-
where he
I would
is.
imagine it would take something, you know, like a tough life to make a man as hard as he is, you know. I mean,
Yeah,
he is a very sharpened edge, which means he's had to go through his scrapes in life. So I'm
yeah,
not surprised to hear that, but I
absolutely.
am interested in hearing the stories though.
And I'll tell you, not to be too much of a shill, but one reason to go to arncomic.com and pre-order the book on Kickstarter, along with getting the Kickstarter exclusive hardcover edition and all the bonuses we unlock, there's something in the book that he has never. I'll even go as far as to say there's something in the book about his wrestling career that
Okay.
he has never publicly spoken about.
Whoa.
Yeah. And it's funny because Mike was on that Zoom call with us. Because again, we did this call very similar to with Tony with Zooms. And Mike's on the call and our editor Drina Joe's on the call and he's talking about this thing. And I'm like, I never heard that, man. That's wow, that's interesting. And I see the look on Mike's face, and Mike's like, you know, like Googling and like, I've never heard you say this. And he goes, I can't find any evidence, like evidence, but any mention of this anywhere. I'm like, Arn, whatever you do not talk about this again until the book comes out.
Yeah.
But it's pretty. And Doc was like, hey, how come this has never come up? And he goes, I guess I never really thought about it till now, until we
Yeah.
were going through things this way that he did this. So it's pretty cool. And yeah, he's had a pretty uh he's overcome some pretty strong circumstance, but like you said, he's also always honored the business, he's respected the business,
Right.
and he's contributed a lot to
Oh,
the business.
Yeah.
there's no doubt. Yeah. So, you know, it's his story and he's telling the story and everything, but you're the writer. So
Right.
how does that relationship work with him, you know, giving you these stories and then you know, writing this out in your own way, like where with your own creativity involved
Well,
in it.
you know, I think it was the same thing with Tony, and I mean this with zero disrespect to Tony, but Tony has this really cool career, but a cool career does not a story make, right?
Right.
And with Tony, what it became very evident to me was his story was like the story, like the American, no pun intended, the American dream.
Yeah.
Again, little kid that loves wrestling, works in the industry, blah, blah, blah. With Arn has had, on paper, a much more colorful career, right? However, one of the things I specifically did not want to do was make this an illustrated narrative of Arn Anderson's best matches.
Right.
And in fact, I'm going to tell you right now, there is obviously in-ring action with Arn in the book, but you're not going to get play-by-plays of like, oh, here's his match with this, here's his match with this.
Right. Yeah. It's not
Yeah.
about
So,
that.
yeah, I mean, he has a podcast for that. You have YouTube, you have the WWE Network, a million ways to find that stuff.
Right.
So for me, what it turned into was, what is, this sounds so pretentious and I apologize, but what is the story? What makes this a fascinating, and what aspect of a story makes a fascinating book to read? Not just for marks, not just for fans
Yeah,
like
but
us,
for anyone, yeah,
for anyone.
yeah,
And I had dinner with Arn. A bunch of us had dinner with Arn and Brock one time, and he told a story that I won't tell now, that really started to kind of light a spark in me creatively. And ultimately, what I realized, what Arn's story ultimately is Arn's story is the story of the enforcer. He's always been the guy behind the guy.
yeah,
He's the guy who is a long running heel. Well, the heel's job is ultimately to put over the baby faces. He was
right,
in the Four Horsemen. He would make everyone in the ring look better. When he created the Four Horsemen, Ric Flair was, I think, the front piece of that, because the level of charisma he had and stuff. But and I'm not taking anything away from Ric Flair. Ric
right,
Flair can
right,
be Ric Flair storyline wise because you have Arn Anderson behind you,
right,
right? You got this powerhouse. And what I realized is, talking to Arn about his early life and stuff like that, he has been the enforcer his whole life.
yeah,
He's always been the muscle. He's been the guy. And he learned that from his grandfather. I'm not saying his grandfather's a leg breaker, but his grandfather took care of his grandmother and him,
right,
and
exactly,
it held up the family. And then throughout Arn's life, sometimes he was the muscle in that sense, not illegal, but
yeah.
he was a brawler.
We would have heard about it, yeah.
Yeah, right. But his whole career. So how I approach this as a writer was, again, that sounds pretentious, but his whole career, it's like, what's the story of the guy that is the guy behind the guy,
Mhm. Yeah,
you know? And as a result, it became very easy to tell Arn's story. This book could have been 300 pages
yeah,
easily,
yeah.
easily.
I'm a big fan of autobiographies, and so like I love reading about like just the small things, about
Yeah.
what it was like on a Sunday morning when he was 8 years old, and and
Who showed you the scripts?
yeah,
Yeah.
just like things like that. Like I'm someone who really appreciates that stuff. So this
Yeah.
is something that would be right up my alley.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing too. It's like, this is ultimately a biography, autobiography, however you want to look at it. It's him telling his story, and I'm just telling it then through the comic book medium. But it's about his life, and it's about how he approaches the business and how his early years shaped, and you said it earlier, the performer he became, the athlete he became, the man he became,
Right. Yeah.
and the man he is now. And it's a really fascinating story. And I think, again, this is one of those books that, obviously, me being mainly a horror guy, sometimes I feel like I have to kind of drag my pre-existing audience to a book like this, because, like, oh, I'm not really a wrestling fan, and I'm like, that's okay, because this is a fascinating story in and of itself. And if you're a
Right.
fan of Arn Anderson, I think it gives it that much more gravitas to
Yeah.
what you're seeing, because we've seen the struggles. We know this guy. We've seen him go through all this stuff.
Right.
Dirk, I've talked to you for years about one of the first things we started talking about was wrestling.
Yeah.
So like now you've done the book with Tony, you've done the book with Arn, you're for lack of a better term, you're in that world now. Like, how does that feel for you as the wrestling fan?
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah, it is.
Understatement of the year, right?
Yeah, no, it's pretty cool, dude. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. No, it's honestly, what it comes down to is, it's really an honor.
Yeah, for
um,
sure.
I always considered myself someone that knew a lot about the inner workings of the industry, and getting to work with Tony and getting to work with Arn, you quickly realize that, even as a smart fan, or a smart mark, or a smart, or whatever, armchair quarterback, or whatever you want to call yourself, as much as we think we know from the outside looking in, we don't know nearly as much as we think we do.
Right.
And throughout working with both gentlemen, there's been little nuances and little things about the culture and the industry that you never consider. And you realize what a tight knit community is, even with the internet, even with the dirt sheets, and even with all that stuff.
Yeah.
We do not know nearly as much as we think we do. And I'm not saying that's something I'm deep on the inside and I know all the inner workings. I don't. But I've stood at the door long enough to know that there's much more that I don't know, that I didn't even know I didn't know.
Well, and you're talking about two guys who have been in this business for a long time at very high levels, you know, and so
Yes.
they have, I mean, those are ears that any active wrestler today would love to bend. I mean, like they
Right.
just, I mean, like that's valuable knowledge and time spent having any conversation with them at all, and
Absolutely.
anything they impart on you, whether it's you know, a story or advice or whatever the case is. I mean, those guys are walking encyclopedias with a vast, great experience behind them that no one will ever be able to match.
Right.
And those guys are living you know, treasures right now that need to be mined through. And so I think anything like this that comes out that gets a little bit more about them out there and can give, you know, future wrestlers or anyone just involved in the business period, some sort of, you know, either inspiration or
Mhm.
you know, just some more background on a guy who, you know, did incredibly well in this business and became, you know, a name synonymous with the business. You know, I think things like this are very valuable in this and in any endeavor, really. But I mean, there's some people out there that they're the master class, and
Right.
you know, take that knowledge while we can, you know. So
Yeah. And yeah, you're exactly right. And that I think plays into the other thing I was going to mention about this was it's also an honor. It's really an honor to be trusted with shepherding these stories.
absolutely,
And
absolutely.
anytime that, you know, I always tell this joke when I first worked with Tony, and again, I've worked with other real life people as well as subject matter. Like I do a book with the rap rock band Twisted, a book with
Mm,
them called Haunted Highons. And in Haunted Highons, the Jamie and Paul characters are Jamie and Paul characters. So we approach it a different way, and they're trusting me to not misrepresent their brand through these facsimile versions of themselves.
right.
With Tony and with Arn, it's one step farther because I am representing the real person,
Hmm.
right? I am representing Tony Schiavone.
It's
I
a
am
lot of.
representing
I'm
Arn
sure.
Anderson.
I'm sure you feel the weight of that responsibility for sure. Yeah, I mean
Yeah,
that is a big deal. I mean, and yeah, you know, anyone could have been the one who got, you know, picked and tagged to do this one, and you got the gig, and you got the second one because you did so well on the first one, you know. And
thank you.
so
Yeah,
that speaks to your talent and obviously their trust in you.
But you're
thank you.
really the perfect choice because you do love wrestling, you do have a knowledge of wrestling, but more
Right.
importantly, you have a respect for the history and for the sport of wrestling. So you're really the perfect person. You're not an outsider coming in just to write a comic book.
Thank you. And it's funny too. Like I was saying, the joke with Tony when I got to do this was when they asked me if I wanted to write the book with Tony, I said I'd be willing to have that conversation. You know,
Yeah.
and the reason they say that is because I did not want to get involved with writing a book that's just going to be a vanity project to put somebody over.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
You know, and so I in a way I kind of went into this like, okay, you know, this is going to take some time to do. Is there something here? Is there meat on the bone?
Well, yeah,
And
because it's still your name going on it, you know, either
right,
way. Yeah.
right,
So,
right. People could read the Arn Anderson book and be mad that we're not doing retelling in pictures of his top 10 matches and stuff like that. And what's going to happen is they might they might drag Arn's name through the mud a little bit, but they're going to drag my name through the mud just as
yeah.
much, if not more, because
Sure.
I chose
Yeah.
not to. Well, Arn and I made the decision, but I guess I steered the ship towards not focusing on that. So there is a certain responsibility there. But at the end of the day, Arn's really happy with the book. I'm happy with the
But
book.
I think that's smart because those stories have been told.
Yes,
We want to hear the stuff that has not been told, you know.
exactly.
Arn's been around a long time, and there's been a lot of interviews, and there's a podcast, and
Exactly.
like you said, you can go online, you can watch all these matches and stuff. It's like, if you really want to get into the weeds and deep dive it, then you can do it,
Right.
But give me something that I'm not going to find in any of those other places, and that sounds like what you got.
Even in how we told the story, I knew going into this one, I wanted to do a 2-artist approach. And so I went with Sean Daly and Colm Griffin. And Sean Daly, who's done books like Samurai Grandpa, for example, which tells you the kind of work he does. He has a very distinct watercolory style. And I dare say even a little more animated, a little more cartoonish in a way, stylized.
Cool.
And I have him doing all the present Arn stuff. So when Arn is in the present talking to us, we open the book with Arn in the gym, present day.
Yeah.
Right. Even Brock makes an appearance in the beginning. That's Sean. Then when we do these extended flashback sequences when Arn's talking about his past life before we jump back to the present, Colm Griffin is doing that. Colm has a much more, I don't say photorealistic style, but a much more realistic style for that. Colm did the chapter Butts and Seats. So the chapter with Foley and all that. And
I love that idea, though, that you've got a different artist to represent the two dichotomies of time periods and stuff.
Yeah.
That puts
concept.
I like that. Very cool.
Thank you. And it was fun. And there was that same idea again about how we tell the story well. And we needed someone that could show little kid Arn all the way up to in his prime Arn and stuff like that, and moving on and on. And then you have Sean Daly doing the present day Arn with his totally different style, this, the big blocky guy that he is, and it's fun. It's a cool way to weave through the whole thing. And I'm very honored that Arn has let me have this privilege and this honor to do this. I'm exceptionally excited about the book, working with Colm, working with Sean on this. It's a 128-page book, so it's more than 6 issues of comic book. It basically has like 6 issues of comic book content, I guess, when you break it down.
Awesome.
It's a big book, and I'm really, really excited people see it. I'm honored to have the opportunity.
Real quick before you go, I did want to ask about the book gimmick, where it seems like all your photos, you're holding the book up over your face. Is this where is this coming from?
I have a face for the written page is why.
Yeah.
No, we're breaking kayfabe, right? When I started my career, I always wanted an image or a logo or something that wasn't tied to any one book, right? So even when I was doing Nightmare World, even though I knew Nightmare World is a book that I'll be able to sell for the rest of my life, and I still do, I've never done a signing appearance where I haven't sold a copy of Nightmare World, at least one copy of Nightmare World. That book goes forever. But I knew I was going to do it in the books. So I was talking to my buddy, Jim Reddington, who does a lot of the lettering on a lot of my books. And he's a graphic designer as well. And I said, I need a logo. I need something that people will instantly connect to Dirk Manning. And he goes, I've got just the thing. And he pitched this idea to me, the top hat and the scarf, ironically playing into the iconic image of London After Midnight, which I also now am writing the adaptation for. Wow. But he did that for the guy with the mask and the hat and the glasses. And I said, oh my God, that's brilliant. I said, I hate photographs anyway, so this is perfect. So for years online, no one knew what I looked like. Okay. Then when I started doing conventions, people want to get a picture with me, right? And this happened almost immediately when someone, it's like someone buys a book, right? So like say they, and this is kind of, I guess, a look of what the Dirk Manning avatar looks like. And I'll go take someone take a picture. I'm like, yeah, okay, I sure. And they go, wait, hold on. They go, oh, you gotta like cover up your face. They gotta cover your face. I go, here, I'll just do like this with the book. And that became the thing, it was like that became the gimmick.
It's funny too, because most people want to get the guy's face or whatever in the photo if they're getting a shot with somebody, but it just played into the gimmick for you perfectly. Right. So it was actually
me,
cool.
It was like
it was cooler to get you to hold the book up and stuff. So,
right.
Well,
and
that's a good story. That's a good reason.
Yeah, and people would get mad if someone showed a picture of me online
Yeah.
with my face. Like, no, you got to protect this thing. Like, he's a man of mystery. No one knows who he is. You know? So,
well, John, you can go in and block out the lower half of his face
right.
for this video, right?
Yeah.
You don't.
You know,
don't
what
have
I do, it became a thing. Like when we started doing like interviews and stuff like this. One of my earliest interviews I did, like behind the books, and it's like, you know, it's fine.
At
You know,
some
for the
point,
picture,
you had to give. You had to.
you know, we're doing a video interview like this. We're just gonna talk normally. You know, I've only ever dressed in that costume in real life 3 times, and 2 of them. The joke is, if I'm doing a signing on Halloween, that's my Halloween costume is Dirk Manning. So I'll do the hat and the scarf or the mask and stuff. But other than that, no. I mean, it just.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where that came from, and it's kind of stuck. Plus, it's good advertising for the books too, right? People can see the book, they can see what I'm promoting. So
Yeah.
But it is cool because way back in Motor City Comic Con, you know, Artist Alley, there's hundreds of artists there,
right.
and they all have beautiful work, whether it's books, art, whatever. But you stood out. Like yours was that was one of the things that drew me to your booth. And then I started talking and looking at all your stuff, and I liked talking to you. I liked your books. But that originally that big poster you had with that on there was
Right.
one of the main reasons.
Well, it definitely tells people what you're going to get, right? It's like, this is not a guy that does superhero books per se, you know? You know, and it's funny. I've had arguments with people over the years, editors and publishers and stuff like that. So like, you know, you got to lose the top hat and scarf guy. He's 20 years old, and I'm like, it's my golden arches. I said,
Yeah.
most people know I don't really walk around. Like right now, I'm talking to you on a Sunday in a t-shirt and jeans, right? It's
Yeah,
like I don't walk around in a top hat and scarf.
Yeah.
That's kind of like the gimmick and the persona. And it's funny, like you look at Neil Gaiman, like the first 15 years of his career, whatever, was Neil Gaiman would always have a leather jacket and sunglasses on.
Right.
You know, and you got Alan Moore with the big beard. I mean, and Grant Morrison with the white suits. You know, it's like a lot of writers, we do stuff subtly to kind of brand ourselves. And that became mine. And then the holding up the book and stuff like that.
You gotta stick to the gimmick, man.
It works.
It works. At this point, it is what it is. If people don't like it, it's been 20 years. Deal with it, you know.
The longer you have it, the more it's cemented in people's minds too. I mean, so if you start changing things up, it's like, no, if you've got something and you like it, just hang with that, and people
write it out, baby.
Yeah. There's a couple times, even like the cover of Buried But Not Dead. This book was nominated for a Ringo Award, and Jen Apple does this amazing rendition of the Dirk Manning avatar. I thought, maybe I make this the avatar. Maybe I make this my backdrop. I mean, and I'm just like, just that classic one. I don't know. I can't quit on it. Maybe for 20 years I'll give it a fresh coat of paint, but it's here. It's staying. This is it. You know, I'm 20 years into this now, so at this point, it is what it is.
Well, you could do limited edition T-shirts. You know, I have the One Johngy logo, and I've done variations of it with one of your friends, Kaylin Smith, drew one of the newer logos for me.
Yeah. And Kaylin's amazing, and right, I know so many very talented artists. We've done buttons and stuff like that over the years. Like I said, coming full circle, you know, this interview. This March will be 20 years, and I think I'm going to pull the trigger on something that is equally amazing and ridiculous to celebrate 20 years. A Dirk Manning. Here's an exclusive, a piece of Dirk Manning merchandise that people have often asked about, and I think they might have been joking, but maybe not. But either way, come March,
it's coming.
It's coming. I'll have it. See, you know, I presume I'll be doing C2E2 in March, and
I'll be there.
You'll have a chance to get this really cool piece of Dirk Manning merchandise if I pull the trigger on it.
Oh, you got to. You have to.
Well, now you have to. You've said it on. You've said it on here.
About publicly. I'm going to send the email as soon as I'm done. Like, go ahead, let's do it.
Yeah.
But
I'm buying it. Whatever it is, I'm in.
What's that?
I'm buying it. Whatever it is, I'm in.
Okay, I'm not going to gouge anybody. Don't worry. It's not overly expensive, but it's funny, and it's a good way to celebrate 2 decades of decadence.
So, what is the name of the book with Arn Anderson?
Arn Anderson, My Life as the Enforcer. People can go to arncomic.com. If you pre-order it on Kickstarter, if you pre-order it on Kickstarter, it's the only way to get the Kickstarter exclusive hardcover edition of the book. We're currently unlocking round 1 stretch goals, which is the 4 horsemen of comic book signatures. Mm-hmm. Arn was very fortunate to let us do that. So right now, if you order the book, you get a book plate inside of the book, and then you get signatures by myself, Colm Griffin from Ireland. We're about to unlock, as of this conversation, Sean Daly from Canada. Then the last signature, the four corners, will be Arn Anderson. We'll sign every book plate as well. That'll come
Wow.
with your hardcover.
Is there an official release date yet for this, or is this? Are you still waiting on?
I think we're probably looking at close to the spring,
Okay.
and then it'll be, the Kickstarter books will be probably delivered close to the spring, and then after that we'll release a trade paperback edition in comic book stores and things like that. But that'll be coming through Source Point Press. I don't want to jump the gun on that. I think I know what it's going to be, but Kickstarter backers will have the books by the spring.
So you probably
Awesome.
won't have any at C2E2, or you might. Or
Stay
we
tuned.
have
Stay
to see.
tuned.
It's not a
Stay
no.
tuned.
It's not a
I
no.
would love to have the books for March, but we all know the world of printing's upside down right now, things like that. But I mean,
Yeah.
the book is pretty close to finished right now. So, but that is really my goal. I would love to have it on my table in March, but stay tuned.
Right on.
We will be.
Well, Dirk, hey man, it was a pleasure to meet you. It was a pleasure to have you on the show. You have an awesome story, no pun intended, and
thank you.
But I'm happy for you because this sounds like something that you obviously have enjoyed and appreciate, and again have been honored to be given this responsibility. And I think that that's a very cool thing, and I'm happy to hear that you got to experience that, and hopefully you'll experience more things like this down the road as a result of it. So
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So good for you, man. We'll be keeping an eye out, and you never know. I go with John to C2E2 every once in a while, so maybe I'll catch you the next one around.
I'll tell you, C2E2, and I say this unequivocally, is my favorite of the big shows every year. So
Yeah.
This year might be the year to come out. Like I said, I can't promise that Kickstarter backers at least won't have their books, but hopefully so, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, I would love to see you there. So
Well, either way, if I'm there, I'll stop by with this guy, but I know he'll be there. So
I will be there bugging you for one of those pictures, as always.
yeah.
Dirk, man, really appreciate it. Aside from the interview, I appreciate the friendship you've given me and all the interviews and all the fun we've had over the years. It's been a blast. I look forward to a lot more fun in the future. Keep us in the loop. We'd love to. Anytime you got a big project you want to promote, we'd love to have you back on.
Anytime.
I sincerely appreciate that. I'll give you the last plug then right now. The Tales Mystery Omnibus is coming out from Source Point Press in January. Cthulhu Jr. and Friends, the full graphic novel, February. Hope Special Edition is coming out in December. Arn Anderson, Haunted Highlands Volume 2. Ton of cool stuff on the horizon. People can go to dirkmanning.com, learn a little bit more about me, see my whole bibliography. I'm on all social media channels or venues or whatever platforms.
Yeah.
At Dirk Manning, including YouTube at Dirk Manning. So again, appreciate you guys. Thank you very, very much for this opportunity to talk about the book. And again, arncomic.com. Get the pre-order, the Kickstarter exclusive hardcover. Trust me, it's not going to be easy to find creators from the United States, Canada, Ireland, all together to get signatures at once, like we're offering with this book. So
absolutely.
And
thank you again.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again, man. You have a great night, and we hopefully will talk again soon.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Dirk.
All right.
Take care, buddy.
Be well.
Bye-bye.
And that was Dirk Manning. What a cool guy. I love that guy. I've known him for years. Like I said, he's a great guy. Talented.
Very cool. I liked him a lot too. And when I was a kid, I as I've told you before, I had a pretty long stretch where I wanted to both draw and write comic books, because I did like the writing part of it too. And because I would be drawing them and stuff, I just had to write them because they needed a story, So, but I agree with what he was saying in that, like, if you're going to be a writer, it's got to be something that like is something that you crave. It's something that you got to really want to do it, And I don't think I quite had that in me. I think I did it out of necessity more than a desire to write,
Well, he's really interesting because he has horror books, he's had a book on like on actual writing, and now he's going into the wrestling field.
Yeah.
He's spraying all over, and it's all equally good. I've got a bunch of his books already, and I will be getting the Arn Anderson book, of course.
Well, I'm definitely very interested in it because, like I said, I love autobiographies. An illustrated one is even cooler. I like hearing about just the real life of somebody because it's like he said, it's, for everything everyone appreciates about Arn as a performer or as a mentor or a man who's contributed so much to the business, who he is as a person is what has allowed him to do all of those things. So to hear the story about how he became the man that he is a very, to me, I love hearing that. That's a very fascinating story because then it puts a lot of the other stuff in a different light and perspective,
And that's what was missing from his biography, the one or his autobiography that he came out years ago. Interesting book, some wrestling stories, kept it within storyline, within the storyline. So there wasn't a whole lot of Arn in there.
Right.
The guy behind Arn, I should say. You know what I mean?
Well, we're gonna get it. It sounds like so.
If Dirk says it, I believe the guy. He's never steered me wrong on his books. He was excited about Butts and Seats, and this is awesome. And it was an awesome book, and I got to meet Schiavone at the convention. Super cool guy. A lot of people don't know that he did a lot of baseball broadcasting, Schiavone, for the Atlanta teams and some minor league teams down there.
I think the only reason I might know that is because you probably told me before, but yeah.
Occasionally you do listen to me.
Occasionally. I can't, I can't help it. It's, a real quiet room or something like that.
I talk a lot.
I can't, get, the earplugs fall out or something, just.
I did think it was interesting though when he was talking about the logo. I kept thinking, I didn't want to interject myself, but I kept thinking of my dumb logo. A lot of people in the beginning, like I didn't intend any of this to be what it is. I just put up a stupid website or blog, and I just threw that on there as a logo just for fun. And then little by little, like it kind of like, for lack of a better term, snowballed. And before I knew it, I had T-shirts and I was doing interviews. And then like now this is my logo. I'm not going to change it now.
Yeah. Well,
although,
like I said, once you've had it for so long too, it's it's like when the WWE has changed its logo several times, and every time people are pissed about it. It's like I mean, I'm fine with the way it is now and everything, but I remember when it first went from like just them losing the F, and then they just kept the W, then they changed the W to something else to look like and then they it's just it's like. But then you've got, like he said, you got your golden arches, and it's just like that's been the classic. That's what it's been since day one. Just leave it, and then it's just all the more recognizable if you keep it the same thing. So
what do you think he's coming out with in March? What is the big 20th anniversary item? I've got to guess.
I'm guessing the Johngy mask or something really disturbing. People probably brought it up and said, and he was like, I think they're joking, but they might really want it. I don't know. And so
okay, funny boy, what do you really think? Do you have a guess as to what it might be?
It could be something along the same lines, in that like maybe it's like the hat and the thing for like someone else to like a mask kind of costume thing or something like that. I don't know. What do you think?
I'm thinking bobblehead.
That's very doable. Yeah.
And I'll tell you a slight one of the reasons why I say that is Schiavone's got a bobblehead.
Okay.
So Schiavone.
John, a lot of people have bobbleheads.
I know, but he's worked with Schiavone. I'm just thinking there might be some interplay there where he gets a bobblehead. Dirk, if you're listening, I'll take a Dirk Manning bobblehead.
Well, you'll never need one of yourself because you are a bobblehead. So that being said, John, if people wanted to see your bobblehead on social media somewhere, where could they find you?
They could find me at Johngy's Beat pretty much anywhere. Anywhere you look on the web, type in Johngy's Beat and you'll find one of the sources where I am, including the Johngy or Else podcast. But where could they find Tommy Else?
Well, John, are you sitting down?
Yep.
They can find me on the gram at Tommy_else. They can find me on the twit at Tommy_else. They can find the John G. or Else podcast on the book as the John G. or Else podcast. They can find us on the tube, the John G. or Else podcast. They can find us on the spot, the John G. or Else podcast. And they can also find our merchandise in the tee at prowrestlingtees.com in the John G's Beat store. As always, ignore the rest of the shirts with John on them and just grab the ones that say the John G. or Else podcast, and you'll be the coolest kid in town. So, well, John, it's been another fantastic episode.
It
was a good one. All right. There, happy.
Love it.
All right. Well, you take it easy. Thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks again to Dirk Manning for being here with us. And yeah, hopefully we'll be able to come back with an update. And if he does have something at C2E2, you can bring it on the show, and we can do a little show and tell there.
So look for Dirk Manning, look for the Arn Anderson book, look for the Arn Anderson Kickstarter project happening right now, and jump on it now while you got a chance.
All right. Until next time, I've been who else but Tommy Else, and with me as always is the man on the beat from JohnG'sBeat.com, Mr. John Robleski.